Hi, Michelle. How are you doing today?
Good morning. I'm going to just make you the co host and I'll stick around and we'll be good to go.
Thank you so much. I'm so honored
You're
to.
welcome. We're excited to have you here for sure. Yeah, you should be able to do all of the things, it looks like. So,
Okay, great. Great. Right. And listen, I'm super chill, everybody. And so, this is Zoom. I know some of us are at home, some of us are in the office. So, if things are going on, if we got babies, animals, I'm completely understanding of that. I'm right there with you. I've got my animals here. So, there's absolutely no worries about that. No need to feel self conscious while people are coming in. I just want this to be a safe learning space for everybody where everybody can get comfortable and relax and just be themselves. Right. Okay, great. And I'll have that up so that way as people are coming in, we can just see the screen. All right. Hello, everybody. Um, to just start, while people might still be coming in, to answer Dr. Gordon's question, I think the frequently asked questions mentioned something about like due to the scope of the conference that I'm not really sure if we can provide recordings, but if we can, great. Like if you are able to have access to this recording, awesome. Um, but I think that would be something that we'd have to ask the folks who are heading this conference about. Just because when I read the facts and it said, like, oh, due to the scope, we're not providing any recordings. I was like, for individual sessions, I was like, oh, okay, all right, that's all right. But if you need anything from me, I can send you the PowerPoints, and we can go over any questions that you have just about the material and about our discussions. So I'll be more than happy to chat with you, Dr. Gordon, some more via email or Zoom, however you'd like, so that way I can support you as much as possible when it comes to this topic. I hope that helps. All right. And so, is everybody ready for me to get started? Let's see who we got here. Okay. So if there are any questions that you have, especially just about the material, feel free to send the questions through the chat. So that way we'll have time at the end to discuss questions. And if there are some questions we can't get to, please let me know your email address and a good time that we can talk so I can reach out to you and set up that time. Or just to make things easier, I'll put my email in the chat. So that way you can email me and we could set up some time to talk more about what it looks like to utilize hip hop therapy in group counseling. So let's just get down to it and see what we can do today. Awesome, Dr. Gordon. Great. Yeah. All right. So the topic that I'm going to be presenting to y'all today is really talking about like how to enhance resilience and community for Black trans girls in group counseling, particularly when we're using hip hop therapy. And so before we get to that, we need to really talk about the facts of like what's happening in the world right now, right? So with the statistics that I have for you here, you'll see that, there's a lot going on when it comes to trans violence, Black trans violence. So we know that Black trans women are being murdered at alarming rates, to the point where it has even been established that the life expectancy for Black trans women in their communities is 35 years old. Right? And so that's a pretty devastating statistic. And so with that, and we know the other statistics here when it comes to assaults, violence, and even how the lack of response from lawmakers and media sources, how they're saying, yes, these trans women are dying, but what are they really doing to be able to prevent these murders? With all of that going on, it's really important to recognize and start thinking about, like, how do the identities of being Black, being trans, being women, right? How does that all connect? And even their age, how does that all connect to how we make sense of the world? How do they make sense of themselves, right? And so with that in mind, we have an ethical responsibility to consider, how we can support transgender youth of color, especially women of color, when they are trying to explore who they are while still navigating the world around them and seeing what's happening to other Black trans women. And that's something that really inspired this presentation and this area of research. For me, it's like, we need to figure out how we can best support these women in counseling. And so when we think about hip hop therapy in general, I really took an interest in hip hop therapy with Black trans women and their community, because when we think about the lack of research that's still in development about like external support during gender transition and the impacts of social networks during gender transition. There's definitely, when we think about group counseling and the benefits it can offer, there's really a lot to explore there of how we can use that when Black trans women are going through gender transition and when they are exploring themselves and the world around them. And so, really, this is going to be an opportunity for us to start thinking about and talking about, like, how can we create an empowering space so it's like they can have um, this space to just self-discover, find themselves, and find community. And we're going to talk about all of that, especially as they navigate oppressive environments like school, which is actually what we're going to talk about next. Yeah, we got a lot of cool people coming in. Yes, come on in, everybody. Welcome. Make yourselves comfortable. All right. So let's talk about the academic stressors that really impact Black trans girls in school. So I did list just some of the things that show up for Black trans women in schools that I think we really need to talk about, right? So we need to talk about how in the school system, right, there's not a lot of environment where cultural histories are being validated appropriately, right? Schools that we're attending may still be teaching from a colonialist lens without honoring the gifts, the legacies, the histories of Black communities, right? And with that, there's an invalidation of scholarship for Black students. There's an invalidation of cultural history, cultural recognition, right? Think about all the time that if you're using social media, we start to see these um, illuminating facts that, did you know a Black woman invented this? Did you know that a Black man invented this, right? And it's all because of the way that our history is whitewashed. And so Black trans women can still experience that in the school system. And also at the same time, or even at different times, if they're not experiencing stress from that, they might be experiencing stress from a lack of safety when using restrooms that affirm their gender identity. We have to think about the intersectionality that takes place there and how that impacts Black trans girls in the school system. And therapists, I think, are one of the key people that can really start thinking about this and say, okay, how do I support Black trans girls in school knowing that this is going on? Um, to say a little bit more about the invalidation of one's scholarship, there may be school spaces, because we even see it at the doctoral level, where the scholarship interests of Black women, especially Black trans women, are often invalidated because professors or teachers might want them to study something else, something that they think is more valid or appropriate, which in a way is violence, right? It's violent because it blocks the way that Black trans women produce knowledge into this world and change the system and narrative of the school system, the field of education, etc. And please let me know if you have any questions. I'll be more than happy to stop and go through. So let's talk about the benefits and really start looking at hip hop therapy, like what it is actually. So hip hop therapy is a form of therapy that involves the use of hip hop music and culture. So I think a lot of people get misled when they think of hip hop therapy at first. They're like, oh, it's just the music. It's not just the music. It's also the culture. If we're not necessarily listening to music or looking at music lyrics, it's really about incorporating that culture of hip hop into our group therapy spaces. So that way we can promote healing and liberation among minoritized clients that are here with us. We also have to remember too that hip hop therapy is especially relevant for communities that are immersed with hip hop culture, simply because we have to realize that hip hop is America's dominant youth culture and that it's embraced by youth all around the world. And so because of that, hip hop holds a special place for many people's hearts, especially for minoritized communities, because hip hop can really speak to communities of color and their minoritized experiences. And so for those of you who know Dr. Bettina Love, she did write an article that really talks about how hip hop feminism and really thinking about how feminism and hip hop intersect can create a space of like agency and resilience for trans women of color. And so when we think of that, you know, this started to lead me down the good rabbit hole here of like, okay, how do we utilize group therapy to provide this space of agency and resilience? Because also scholars out there have really been thinking about if hip hop can be used to reclaim our pride from racial oppression, it can most certainly be used to reclaim, you know, our LGBTQ plus identities and experiences from oppression too. And so, as trans women of color navigate their agency in environments that are rooted in oppression, hip hop feminism or hip hop therapy of what we could offer really does offer a space for them to reclaim their voices, their agency, and to also share that with each other. So, the main goals here that we want to look at when it comes to hip hop therapy with Black trans girls is to one, promote collaboration and community. And we're going to talk about why that's important. To also explore identity formation, to increase self esteem, to honor Black trans girl voices, and to also promote social change. These goals and objectives are congruent with feminist therapy, so you'll see a lot of similarities there. And the main overarching goal is to provide a space of healing and liberation. So no matter what you use hip hop therapy for in spaces with Black trans women, the idea is we want it to be a space of healing and liberation and empowerment. And so when we really think about like why the community piece is so important, we really have to start thinking about what the research also says about how Black trans women, you know, come to really appreciate and they find um, a lot of joy and safety in communication with other Black trans women who may be going through the same things as them. And so this can be really helpful for building new relationships, especially when Black trans women may find themselves separated from or estranged by family. And this is also important to consider because trans women just generally may not feel comfortable transitioning in front of their families due to personal discomfort, anticipated disapproval, and the need for independence from family as well. I've worked with clients in the past who have really struggled with the independence piece because even if their parents are supportive, they might become sometimes overly concerned or overbearing to the point where, you know, trans youth feel like, you know, I don't really have a space to be myself because I'm always asked this, I'm asked that, and I know that they love me, but they're not really giving me space to be myself. They might be trying to tell me how to be trans, for example, of that. And so really the community building piece is going to be one of the most essential ingredients to building affirmative spaces with Black trans women, and hip hop therapy can really do that. Simply because it's a space where we can share experiences and support with each other, especially when things at home aren't so great or we feel like we can't be ourselves at home. And this is also really important too for when we are experiencing, again, microaggressions in school environments. So with that being said, hip hop therapy is also really an excellent space to promote self esteem and expressive arts. There's a lot of integration here with hip hop therapy there. And so we do need to talk about how adolescent women, adolescent girls, you know, how they are known to consume sexuality from popular culture, yet a lot of times they may not be given the opportunities to really critically explore the sexualities that are being presented to them or even being thrown onto them, right, by popular media. And we're not really giving them the space to think about how that impacts their self-esteem. And so for those of us out there who are doing this work, awesome. And we definitely need to keep doing more of that. Hip hop therapy is a great way to be able to foster those conversations and to be able to create those opportunities for Black trans women. Expressive arts therapy, you can use it in so many creative ways that aren't even listed here to really start that conversation about you know, how do we feel about our bodies as Black trans women? What does the media say about Black bodies? What does the media say about women's bodies? And what does the media say about Black trans women's bodies? And really starting this conversation so we can start the liberation piece, especially when young women are being bombarded by images of sexuality that could be oppressive and even violent. Um, and I think a lot of people mistaken hip hop for doing that. And just like with any other music content, there are forms of oppression and misogyny there. Yet with hip hop, there are still spaces for hip hop where women can reclaim their agency, they can reclaim their identities, especially when you think about the artists out there who are really putting out really liberation based messages about our bodies, our identities, who we want to be. There's so much of that that's there in hip hop culture. And so I think too it's so important that we take the time to think about, what do we know about hip hop culture now? How does that shape the way that we look at communities of color, especially Black folks? How does it how does it influence the way we view them? And what are some misconceptions we have about hip hop? I think that's one of the biggest things that a lot of people tend to need to work through when they're thinking about hip hop therapy and what hip hop actually is. So moving on from that as well, um, it's really important to think about how when you're integrating expressive arts with hip hop therapy, what does using narrative therapy look like with that? Because that's a great form of expressive arts that fits well with hip hop therapy. So really thinking about, if we are looking at, for example, music videos and lyrics that talk about our bodies and self-esteem, how do we take some time in that group therapy session to write about it, even collectively, like on a big old notebook that's huge, and have everybody just write in it, right? What would that look like? And what types of realizations can Black trans women come to that really help them enhance their self-esteem? And I also like to say collective esteem. Also too, you know, with that being said, that's why I think like body liberation journals can really be made from something like this. So even if like Black trans folks, you know, are able to have with them in session body liberation journals, they can write in it from time to time as they continue to encounter messages about their bodies in popular media, and you know, even in the oppressive controlling images that are put out there about Black and trans bodies and about women's bodies as well. And so this is really a strong element of hip hop therapy, and it's something that can really be used again as Black trans women are exploring their environments, exploring who they are, and really encountering what the world is saying about them, especially when it's from a cisgenderist, from a misogynist lens, right? How do we critique these images? How do we hold on to ourselves during that? So we can also enhance self-esteem through dance. And so it's really important to consider that about what would it look like to create a group therapy space where you guys dance together, like out of joy and togetherness, right? So even if y'all are just standing in a circle and just dancing where you're standing, or you make room for a runway, right? Where they just dance down the middle. What does that look like for them, right? And what can that do? What can that speak to about our bodies, right? What can that speak to about Black trans girls' bodies? And really just allowing them to celebrate themselves and their bodies, especially when you have big events that happen in therapy. So when someone is ready to move forward from therapy, when somebody got that transition, right? They finished their transition, you know, how do we celebrate that in group therapy? And, you know, how do we also take a look at dance from the other way, like objectively too, like as Black trans women, how do we look at dance as outsiders and think about And even as counselors too, how do we look at that and see what that says about agency and the objectification of women's bodies? And twerking is a strong example of that too, because when we think about what white culture has to say about twerking, they see it as this bad thing that's overly sexualized. And we hear a lot of racist undertones associated with that it's animalistic, right? But truth be told, as well, for Black communities, twerking is something that is rooted in agency and self-empowerment. And so how do we really take the messages as counselors, especially, white counselors, how do we take a look at what we know about dance? How do Black trans girls view dance? And how do we help them celebrate dance in ways that honor them without trying to project an image on them about dance and their bodies, right? And how do we set up space for when we're done dancing, set up a space with Black trans girls and be like, all right, let's talk about our dance time together. How did you feel? What came up for you? How did you feel about your bodies during those moments? Were you having thoughts that, like, I feel good about myself? Or were you having thoughts where you were comparing your bodies to your peers around you? And this is especially true during the transition period. It's important to really think about that and create space for those conversations. So that way, again, we can promote healing through those conversations. And so, I'm trying to see if there's anybody else, and trying to see if there's anything else I could say about this before we move forward. I think if anything too, if we create an embracing healing space in group counseling when celebrating, critiquing, or thinking about dance, if we create a space where like Black trans girls can appreciate their bodies and discover ways to be kinder to their bodies, it really helps fight against some of the messages that they may receive about sizeism, about misogyny, and etc. And so hip hop therapy is also really valuable for exploring identity formation because there are many queer Black women who are in hip hop doing the work. And so through examining their works, there's so much that Black trans women can see about themselves or the world around them that can be helpful to healing and empowerment. And you can do this through looking at the lyrics that queer Black women put out through hip hop. We can look at their music videos. We can reflect on themes that are present within the videos and lyrics and really start thinking about and having Black trans girls think about in these spaces, what does this say to my self-concept? What does this say about my identity and the way that I can move through this world, the way that I can change this world? And through really taking the time to explore Black womanhood in this way and how it's represented in hip hop, Black trans girls are given the space and time to critique and as well as enhance the images of hip hop to reflect their own stories as well. So not only is it a space where we can find awe and wonder from these images and these meanings, but we can also critique these meanings if they are non-affirming, if they speak against us and the lives that we want to create for ourselves. And so MC Medusa is a great example of a queer role model in how there are liberating images of Black feminism in hip hop and how we can use these liberating images, meanings in the lyrics to have folks share their stories and experiences in group therapy. And so the number one thing that we always have to remember too is that, hip hop therapy is, especially in this context, is about honoring the voices of Black trans girls. Hip hop is a powerful medium for that. It can be used to express anger, grief, acceptance, a whole bunch of different feelings, right? And especially when we encourage Black trans girls to write their own lyrics, to write their own poetry, right? To write whatever they like and to share these thoughts and feelings with the rest of the group and to utilize call and response. I don't know how many folks are familiar with call and response, but we hear it in hip hop music a lot for those of us who listen to hip hop, or I've even just heard a hip hop song where somebody will say the lyrics and then the audience will sing it back or sing like an affirmation, like, yeah, like in the background, right? And we've even seen, you know, white artists and various other genres take on call and response and use that too. So how does that look in group therapy with Black trans girls? How can we utilize the same thing so that way when Black trans girls are sharing their experiences, their stories, their works of art, the rest of us are there and we're doing call and response? You know, so using call and response and using hip hop therapy gives group members a chance to like vocally affirm and support the voices of their peers, which is so powerful. And it really kind of, I just want to say, like, it decenters whiteness in group counseling spaces, because I remembered with my experiences working at psych hospitals, a lot of times, you know, I would see the counselors around me and they would just use these very stiff norms about, you know, yes, one person talking at a time, but if somebody goes, yeah, whatever, they're considered disruptive, right? So I'm trying to disrupt that and be like, no, that's not inappropriate. What if we do call and response together? And that is a way that we affirm each other. It's just something to think about. And lastly, you know, when it comes to hip hop therapy with Black trans girls, there's a huge part of it that's meant to promote social change. And that's just something that hip hop therapy can do. And so, you know, again, through being able to share, you know, Black trans girl arts, Black trans girls' voices. So creating spaces for that can also promote social change. So when they see things that are not okay in their environments, we give them chances to talk about that together, to talk about that with us, because maybe there's something we can do to promote social change too. And also through examining music lyrics, images, we can encourage Black trans queer girls to really think about the labels, right? Whether they're empowering labels or demeaning labels, to think about who they are and what these lyrics say about them and what they can say back to the lyrics. And so with that too, promoting social change can occur through creating a space of just discussion and dialogue. In case they want to do like a social justice change project together, they might want to do that. And this is a good space for them to foster those ideas. And this is especially true when, you know, when we give Black trans girls the space and time to talk about social change, it can address a lot of important topics like burnout and advocacy for the self and others, as well as confronting family members and friends, right? About various issues that can come up during gender transition, or even if not gender transition, because we do have to remember not every trans person wants to transition, and that's okay. So we can still talk about, as part of promoting social change, how do we disrupt the norm that transgender folks are always looking for a gender transition? Or how do we talk about confronting family members who are using the wrong pronouns, right? All of that can be discussed in hip hop therapy. And it's not just for hip hop lyrics and music videos, but it's also about hip hop art. It's about current events. It's about various things that we can pull together that, again, come from and stem from hip hop culture. And with that, provide Black trans girls with something, messages, images that they can take in, critique, embrace, all as part of self discovery and self empowerment, as well as collective empowerment. So this is especially the time where I think I finished on good time here, because I love to make room for questions and thoughts. So I really want us to think about, and I love creating just sort of a space in here where we can talk together and I can look at questions and go through them, and you guys can openly share if you want to, you know, turn on your mics, ask questions, provide feedback as well. And also think about particularly these questions too, about like, how can you utilize hip hop therapy if you're not already doing that into your counseling work? And how can you hold therapeutic space for Black trans girls and their experiences if you're not already doing that? What are y'all's thoughts on this? Oh yeah, your recordings will be available. Awesome. Woo! Yeah, you're more than welcome to unmute or share some questions in the chat just about your thoughts and some questions you have.
I have a quick question. Can you talk a little bit more about the body liberation journals?
Yes, absolutely. That's a great question. Do you go by Rebecca? Is it okay if I call you Rebecca?
Oh, I'm sorry, this was Michelle. Sorry.
Oh, it's Michelle. Oh, that's okay, Michelle. Sorry about that. All right. So, with body liberation journals, it could be as creative as you want. It can be something where we come up with prompts and we think about what does the media say about our bodies, right? What are some common images that we see? Sometimes, as part of starting a journal, sometimes we might ask folks to go through magazines and cut out pictures of the images that they see that speak to their bodies or speak to how they feel about their bodies, because there's a lot of powerful messages that could be hidden in images. And when we give folks the time to really write those things out, express art in the journals, and even share the journals, it allows us to really start um, questioning what we're consuming about our bodies, especially for Black trans girls. And it shows up in so many different ways. So it can show up related to sizeism, it can show up related to how Black women's bodies are viewed compared to white women's bodies or Hispanic women's bodies, um, and just things like that. Um, so I'm not sure if that was helpful, but it can be an ongoing type of thing where in a group therapy space, we can ask participants or, our clients, okay, let's bring this in every week and sort of see what were some of the things that you saw that said something about your bodies and how did you feel about that? What are some counter messages for those images and messages that if you had the chance to say back to these ads or the chance to say back to these music videos, what would you say back to that about your bodies and maybe even the bodies of your friends? Because I know some folks too get really upset about how they're represented in media and how their bodies are represented in media, especially for Black trans women. And so using this space to say, you know, I don't feel comfortable with the way that our bodies are portrayed. These are the bodies that, these are the images of our bodies that you're placing on my friends and myself, and I'm not okay with that. And I want to define my body this way instead. And through body liberation journals, we can write out those thoughts, feelings, and share them, especially in a group therapy space. But these can also be used individually too. Did that help answer your question? Because I can.
Yes,
Oh,
definitely. Thank you very much.
yeah, you're welcome. Yeah, other thoughts, questions, or even just reflections from you guys about just things that, really stood out to you that you just wanted to openly process here.
I was curious to find out if, since they are journaling, um, do they actually write the lyrics to these hip hops, or do they choose whatever hip hop and put music to it? How have you gone through that? Can you explain that part?
Yeah, I leave it up to them what they want to do. Sometimes it's easier for them to write out the lyrics on one page and write out their critiques on the page next to it, because I think when they do that, they're able to look at the lyrics at deeper levels every time that they read it. And they go, oh, okay. Yeah, I see hidden messages here now that I didn't see yesterday. And so I can comment on that. But sometimes too, I like to keep it flexible and open because sometimes I can encounter a client where they go, I heard this lyric the other day. It was just 3 words long or 4 words long, and it bothered me a lot. And I just want to process about that. So it may not be the full lyrics, but it was just one phrase that really stuck with them and either hurt them or it empowered them. Like some people are like, I came in having a great day because I just heard these lyrics from Lizzo, for example. I heard these lyrics from Lizzo, and that just changed my whole life and the way that I look at relationships and everything. And I'm going to continue to reflect on just those 4 or 5 words, you know, for the rest of my life. So yeah. Does that help answer your question? Because I can try and dig a little bit more.
It does. It sounds like they externalize whatever it is that they're feeling with these words. Another thing is, do you actually have them perform if they want to? If it's in a group setting, what are your thoughts on that?
I love that. I love that. If they want to do that, I'm all about that. And you know, when I used to work in a psych hospital and we thought about things like this, where it's like, yeah, I'd love for you to share what you wrote. I look around the room and see how excited people get. Like there's a new energy that's introduced sometimes when people are allowed to perform and express in a group therapy space. And it especially depends on the context that you're in, right? But there's just some liberation that sometimes can really happen with that, just through the sheer joy that, yeah, we're allowed to express ourselves in here. I love coming to group therapy. So that's one of the reasons why I get so excited. Like when people want to do that, I'm like, yeah, let's go for it. Let's set up some time to do that. And for anybody else who wants to share, let's do that. Let's set up time to do that. To give them that space to externally process, like you mentioned, and to also just to really celebrate who they are. And also with that too, I know that one of the ethical considerations that happen all the time with expressive arts is that you might want to review the material first, make sure that it's not triggering to other people, and that's totally fine. You can still do that. Like I'm always like that too. I'll say, okay, yeah, let's perform that. Can I take a look at it really quick so that way we can talk about anything that you know is triggering or concerning, and doing it in a way that doesn't police them, right? But doing it in a way that it's like, hey, I just want to make sure that like your peers are okay when we share this part. And also letting the peers speak for themselves. So one of the things that I love to do in group therapy is I set up those norms way in advance and I say, hey, listen, I just want you to know that if you're ever feeling triggered or if you're ever feeling um, concerned or bothered by something that's said, you can use your timeout symbol or raise your hand and say, I need help or I need to excuse myself, whatever that might be. So that way, instead of us always being concerned about what others are going to say, we just give all of our clients the space to be able to like advocate that for themselves and be able to say, hey, I was really affected by this. And that doesn't mean I don't want you to share. It just meant I'm having a personal reaction and I need to either step out or I just need additional support. And so really trying to set more room for that. So that way, you know, because it's like we want to review the material, yes, but we don't want to police it either. And it becomes this very delicate balance. Does that help answer your question?
Yes, it does. Thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome. Great questions. Other questions, thoughts, just reflections. I'm open for all of it. Hi, Brandy. Good morning. Just got your message. Yes, that's something I've been working on. What I can do is send out the PowerPoints, but what I'd like to do as well is to, because I'm in continuous development about these types of things. And so once they are in development, if you could just send me your emails before we close, I'll make sure to send out these tips and handouts to the list. So that way, when they're done and finished, you guys can have them and you can use them wherever. You can distribute them wherever you'd like. Because really, this is about, you know, sharing the gifts so that way we can create more affirming spaces. But yes, that's a great question, Brandy. I'm glad you asked that. So please, y'all, let me know your email addresses and I will go ahead and send those out. Absolutely. And I'll actually stop sharing my screen as well for a little bit, because what I'm going to do is I'm going to start putting everything together in a little list. I'm a list person, y'all. So that way I know who to send what to. While I'm doing that, I'm always down for further thoughts, reflections, questions. And yes, take your time. That's okay. We've got time. This is a space for us today. So you're more than welcome to take your time with thoughts, reflections, and questions you have. Awesome. All right. Wonderful. I'm really glad that y'all could make it today. I was like really nervous about this when I first started. I'm like, oh goodness, okay. Let me just get into it and see just what fun we could have in really talking about this. But I'm glad that we did get to talk about this and that we do get to talk about this, because it is so important. It is so important. And you know, it's so life-saving too when we think about how trans folks are impacted by suicide, right? It's so helpful to them when we can create spaces that honor who they are. Yeah, you're welcome, y'all. Absolutely. Yeah. And that doesn't mean I'm getting ready to leave and all that. I'm literally here. Like, I want this to last until 10. So that way we can just take some time to process it all. Yeah, I'm reading the comments. Thank y'all so much. Thank you so much. And like I think, you know, I thank the folks who helped me get to this place too, you know. And you know, when I met Dr. Bettina Love, you know, Dr. Bettina Love is into education theory and practice, and I'm into counseling. And so I'm like, I'm learning about hip hop pedagogy and hip hop therapy from her. And I'm like, this is the total peanut butter and jelly combo. Like, this is a good combo to think about. How does hip hop and therapy continue to go together, and how can we keep using that? You know, I think about the professionals who've been doing this work, and you know, it's just so awesome to know that people have been doing this. And it's just so awesome to see how much healing can really be done when it's based in liberation and joy and self-discovery. Y'all could tell I'm a group therapy person. Yes, I know. I love Dr. Love too, Abby. I was just so honored to be in her presence. I told her that and she was just like laughing. I'm just like, oh my gosh, I'm in front of a celebrity right now. I was like, I didn't bring anything for her to sign. And I'm just like, I missed out on an opportunity here. I got to be with you for 14 weeks and still nothing. I was honored to be in her presence. Yes. She's got a lot of great books out there too. So for those of you who aren't as familiar with her works, I would encourage you to actually take a look at her works, because it is inspirational and speaks to the things that we've been talking about with hip hop therapy. And I also think the things that she writes about when it comes to, you know, supporting Black youth, youth of color, it's helpful to inform any therapy practice. There's always something in the things that she writes that every day I'm like, yes, I can use this with a client. And even if she's not directly speaking to us counselors, it's for us too. So if you ever get the chance to just check out even some of her books, some of her works, articles, I think there's a lot of inspiring material in there. Is there anything that you wish that I had talked about or things that you want me to get into more? Because I know that there were some questions about that earlier. I do want to make sure that I am giving everybody as much information as possible and deconstructing and digging into more if we can. Yes, Michelle, great question. Um, yes and no. I think it depends on the client themselves about how differently I would do things. But like with body liberation journals, we can check on that on a weekly basis, just like I would in a group therapy context. Um, with dancing, it could be a little bit trickier depending on how much space you have in a room, because I know that, you know, when I would do group counseling, the rooms would be a lot bigger, but sometimes the offices I would be placed in for individual counseling could be a little small. And so I also know too that clients can feel self-conscious, you know, dancing, you know, by themselves around a therapist. And I think even when people hear that, it's like, oh, you know, that can get really tricky and weird, right? Like, how would you do that? How would you do that and make sure that everything stays appropriate? People will feel self-conscious about that. So that is just something to consider. And, you know, if they don't feel comfortable, you know, dancing in a therapy space, right? Then it's like, okay, well, try dancing on your own and see how that felt and come back to therapy next week and tell me about how that went. How did you feel when you went out and danced? What did you notice about yourself there? Um, and you can still do it in individual therapy and, you know, it can still be appropriate. Absolutely. It's just, I know that for a lot of people, it can feel a little weird because dance has become so sexualized that it's it's so stigmatized now. So even all of the joy that we've experienced from dance in the past, you know, it has been, you know, dwindled into sexual annotations, just based on the way that, you know, our cultures tend to sexualize a lot of things. So when it comes to dance and individual sessions, we do want to make sure that every context that we set up is safe for the client, and we want to make sure that it's, you know, stays appropriate, especially when we're working with youth. So that way, you know, if parents hear, oh, your client danced in therapy, you know, that it doesn't raise any red flags or it doesn't cause any concern, or it prevents as much concern as possible, if that makes sense. It's a tricky area. So you just want to navigate it carefully as part of good ethical practice. Yeah, you're welcome. That's a great question. I love that question. The lyrics and stuff, though, I would keep that the same. I would have so much fun with that. It's like, yeah, write your own lyrics. Let's listen to music together. I'm okay with that. Some people feel more comfortable sharing their art in just front of like one person compared to a group. So I remembered I did expressive arts with a really shy client. And so individual therapy was a dream for them because of that. And they were able to share a lot more with me there than if I thought about them in a group context. It's like, well, maybe they wouldn't have shared as much. So it all depends on the context. While you guys are thinking about additional things that you might want to ask or share, I was going to look back and see in my own presentation about whether there's anything else I would do differently. No, I think that's it. I think maybe the dance thing's the only other thing I would kind of think about. In C2, if you specialize in dance therapy, like you are a dance therapist, which I know is a thing and I know that's real, then by all means, that's okay. It's appropriate to your specialty. And in the informed consent, you know, they would expect that. Yes, that's a good question with the CEUs. Let me check really quick because I love referring back to my frequently asked questions to see how that works. Let me see. I'm not sure if Michelle has any answers to that question about how the CEs work, um, particularly for this presentation. Um, let me take a look and see something else as well.
I think they go with whenever you registered, but I can try to double check and also ask if you're going to another session. That would be someone will know, but I don't want to give you the wrong answer. But I know that whenever you registered, that's how they kind of connect the dots with that. So if you didn't register and you got the link, you know, that's still okay. But if you registered for the conference, they know that you're attending. So they have ways to look. So don't, you will get your CEUs, but I can double check and try to get more information as well.
Thank you, Michelle. Yes, you're welcome, Dr. Gordon. You're welcome. do we have any closing thoughts or reflections that we want to share as we start closing out and start attending other sessions? I know that some people are heading out, so I'm still here just in case you have any additional questions about anything. Or yeah, you're welcome, Abby, anytime. Yeah, I'll still stick around till the full 10 o'clock just in case anybody has any questions, thoughts, reflections that they want to share. You too, Lauren. Thank you so much. Anytime, anytime.
I am going to head to another session, but feel free to hang out and do what you need to do. I'm just going to leave, so I'm not going to end it. So whenever you leave, you can end the meeting. Does that work?
Yeah, totally. Is there anything
Okay.
else that we need to do?
Nope, that's it. Just end whenever you're done.
Okay, great. Thank you so much for your help,
You're
Michelle.
welcome. It was wonderful to listen and hear. I appreciate it so much. Have a great rest of your day.
You too, Michelle. Thank you again.
Bye.
Bye. All right, Veronica, I'm going to go ahead and close the meeting. Unless there's anything that I can help answer or anything like that, I can stick around for just an extra minute, or you can email me if you want. There. Right. Yeah, so just let me know if you need anything, or if you have any questions or concerns about anything.